Everybody, I am so glad that we have Bassem Eid with us. He is a Palestinian human rights activist, and I really think you're going to enjoy this time that we're going to be able to share together. Bassem is actually, we're recording this because he's in Africa right now, and so I'm sure he'll share about that in a moment. But we've got a great evening lined up for you of, I'm sure, questions that you have about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, things that you're hearing on the news, what's going on in the Middle East. Well, there's really no better person to help us with this than Bassem. And so, Bassem, it's great to have you on our FOI-equipped guest lecture series.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chris.
Steve, why don't you go ahead and lead the way then in our discussion with Bassem?
I appreciate that, Chris, and Bassem, welcome. It's great to talk to you. We were saying before we officially started, your feed from Africa is better than my feed with Chris in the office. You actually have a better picture. So
right.
Kudos to Africa and their web availability and their online cables.
Yes.
I've read a number of your blogs, Bassem, and I got to tell you, they're such an encouragement to me personally. We're with a group, as you know, called the Friends of Israel. And so you're a Palestinian human rights activist. Can you tell us your journey to how you would be writing for an Israeli blog, and how you're viewed by your own people, and how you transitioned, or did you transition? I just want to hear your story. It must be fascinating.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Steve, for an incredible question. As you might know, as you mentioned, I am a human rights activist that I spent around 30 years of my life defending the rights of the Palestinians. I started my human rights career with an Israeli organization called B'Tselem during the first Intifada, that I used to be in B'Tselem as a field worker who used to go to everywhere in the West Bank or the Gaza Strip to document violations committed in that time by the Israeli army against the Palestinians. I continue my work with B'Tselem till the Oslo Accord signed between the PLO and Israel. As you might know, the PLO arrived to Gaza and Jericho first in May '94. In that time, while I was still working with B'Tselem, I noticed that there are so many violations committed by the Palestinian Authority security forces against the Palestinians.
Wow, wow.
Then I decided in that time that I should have to resign from B'Tselem to create a Palestinian organization to deal with the violations committed by the Palestinian Authority against the Palestinians. So in December '95, I founded the Palestinian Human Rights Monitoring Group. And we start, documenting all of these violations committed by the Palestinian Authority. In January '96, I was arrested by Yasser Arafat. This is the price. This is the price, to create a human rights organization under the Arab regime. It's like to commit a suicide.
Yeah.
So I was arrested, but I was so lucky that I was arrested only. I kept in jail only for 25 hours. And the only person who interfered directly in my release in that time, the US Secretary, Warren Christopher, under Bill Clinton administration. Bill Clinton administration used to have a very strong relation with Yasser Arafat in that time. And Warren Christopher is the one who picked up the telephone, and he talked directly to Arafat, and he gave Arafat only 5 minutes to release me.
Is that right? That's amazing.
Yeah, is such detention by Yasser Arafat already gave me a huge impunity from the Palestinian Authority. Don't forget that since 2002 until today, I am living in Jericho in the West Bank, which is completely under the jurisdiction of the Palestinian Authority.
Yeah.
So that's probably, you know, one of the reasons why I get such kind of courage to come and to write and to publish, mainly in the Times of Israel and of course to any other newspapers. I think that from my work in the human rights field, I start realizing so many things, Steve. The first important thing that I realized that the state of Israel exists very strongly in the Middle East, and we shouldn't have to believe those Arab leaders who used to tell us that Israel will be thrown into the sea. I don't think that there is enough space in the sea for Israel in its let's say territory and in its powerful. I don't think that there is any space, and I think that the Arab leaders recently start realizing how much Israel is a very strong country in two important issues. The first one is the high tech. The second one is security. Look to the Abraham's Accord. What brought the Arab countries to sign normalization with Israel in 2 years ago? That's because the security issues. I think that the Arabs these days are trying to lay much more on Israel rather than to lay on the United States. I think that Israel is the one who can take the job and who can deal with the whole threats of the Iranians in the region here.
I was going to ask you, you segued right into the Abraham Accords, which is fantastic. What's your put on your prophecy hat. None of us can prophesy. We're not prophets, but yeah. As you speculate, talk to us about the Abraham Accords and their influence in the Middle East and where you see it going, with the United States under Biden not so happy about the Abraham Accords. They don't talk about it.
Yeah, probably Biden is not so happy, but I think that the countries who signed the normalization with Israel are really very happy. So Biden is not in the context here. You can see tomorrow, the Israeli Minister of Defense, Mr. Benny Gantz, is flying to Morocco. Is flying to Morocco for the chief of staff. The chief of staff is flying to Morocco tomorrow for 3 days to talk with security issues and with selling in hundreds of millions of dollars weapons from Israel to Morocco. I think that will bring a huge economic prosperity to the Israelis. I think that Abraham's Accord, you can see the deadline of the Abraham Accord is economic prosperity to the whole Middle East, not only to Israel, not only to the countries who signed the normalization, not only to the Palestinians, but the whole Middle East is going to benefit from such kind of accord. And I really hope, that more and more countries are going to join the Abraham's Accord. And I am a person who is very optimistic that while more and more Arabs will sign normalization with Israel, that's probably in the near future will help the Palestinians to reach a kind of peace with Israel.
Can I ask Bassem, because this what was going through my mind when you were saying that is it sounds like the Palestinians have a choice to make at this point as well as to whether or not they want to join in on the Abraham Accords and be a part of that growth. Years ago, I went to Reuven Rivlin's house, and there was a meeting there. And it was funny to hear them discuss the things we're talking about. This was before the Abraham Accords, that the potential for economic growth in the Middle East could be a powerhouse in the world if Israel and the Arab nations could get their act together and work together in high tech and areas of security, energy, all of it. But it's interesting, do the Palestinians have a choice right now to either move in the direction that everyone else is going, or could they also at the same time find themselves in a difficult situation if they side with Iran instead of going toward the Abraham Accords?
See, you can, when we are talking about the Palestinian leadership, we have two different categories of leadership. You have the Fatah people in the West Bank, and you have the Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Both of them are acting completely to a different agenda. And that's one of the major problems of the Palestinians, that they are divided and they are unable to be united anymore in the near future. I think that this is one of the major obstacles towards peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. I think that the world looks like that the international community is very happy while the Palestinians are really divided. I didn't see even one country around the world who are trying to help the Palestinians to be united, to be together, to put, a specific agenda towards a future peace with Israel. That's leading me to something very interesting. While the leaders around the world, including President Biden, by the way, while those leaders are supporting the two-state solution for two people, I think that the Palestinian leadership is completely against the two-state solution for two people. Why? Because the Palestinian leadership is much more interesting in a three-state solution for two people. Hamas is defending its own Islamic emirate in the Gaza Strip. Abbas is defending his own empire in the West Bank and the state of Israel. This is how we are living in the past since 2005, and looks like that everyone is so satisfied with his own. So that's exactly the solution that the Palestinians are calling for. Three-state solution for two people. That's all.
What do you think is going to happen on what's called the West Bank under Abbas? He's in his 80s. I know he's been sick. I don't know how his health is right now. Are there any potential leaders? And if so, where are they politically?
Unfortunately, I didn't see right now any kind of a potential leader among the Palestinians. Don't forget also that Abbas is not allowing new leaders to come out. He is not allowing to form any new political parties, and Abbas wants to be the owner of this property, which called the West Bank, with his two sons, of course, not only him. So I didn't see that there is any potential leader right now. And I believe that while Abbas will pass away, it's not going to be an easy moment to the Palestinians. Even the Fatah themselves are so divided. The Fatah themselves, each member of them want to be a president tomorrow morning. So I believe if Abbas will die, some fightings will take place probably some assassination will take place among the Fatah themselves.
Wow.
Leave the Hamas. Hamas is not exist in the West Bank because Israel is existing there. So I am not talking about the Hamas here. I am talking much more about the Fatah party, and probably Israel is the one who should have to interfere in terms, to keep the things under control. Otherwise, that's probably will harass the internal security of Israel itself. So nobody is talking right now about any potential leader. I want to tell you something very interesting, that 4 months ago, 30 Palestinian personalities from the civil society, political activists, they met in an office, they met in an office in Ramallah, and they discussed very interesting topic. The topic was, what is after Abbas? You couldn't believe that 5 minutes after that meeting started, the Palestinian security forces raid the place. They enter to the building. They arrested the 30 people who was in the room. They took them to the jail. They kept them for around 8 hours in jail. And afterwards, they asked them to sign on a commitment that in the future, they will never, ever participate in such kind of conference. So this is Abbas. And Abbas is a person who is thinking that he is going to live forever. I don't think that he is thinking about death. I don't think that he is thinking about the future of his own people. And he is just continuing corrupting them economically and politically.
Amazing. Amazing.
Bassem, I remember you saying we met years ago in Washington, D.C. You were speaking to Congress actually about their funding of the Palestinian Authority because of the curriculum that was being taught at that time. But I remember you specifically saying something when you were growing up, I believe in East Jerusalem, that when Israel came in, you were there for that. And you saw a transition happen that kind of opened your eyes because, the way that you were raised, this was a horrible thing. But then all of a sudden, the world around you changed. And that kind of opened your eyes a little bit. I thought maybe you could share about that.
Yes, indeed, Chris. I want to tell you that I born in the old city in Jerusalem in 1958 under the Jordanians authorities, and I grew up in the Jewish quarter, by the way, till 1966, which means I was around 8 years old. And in June 1966, which is exactly 1 year before the 67 war, the Jordanian government decided to evacuate 500 Palestinian families from the Jewish quarter to the north of Jerusalem in a place which still exists called Shafat refugee camp, which is under the UNRWA responsibility until today, by the way. So the one who made me a refugee is the Jordanians, not the Israelis. And I grown up in that refugee camp for 33 years. I still have 6 brothers who are still living there. And I used, to go once a week or twice a week to visit them over there. So we grew up in a very poor family, very poor family. I have 9 brothers and 1 sister. We were so poor. But after the 67 war, my father found a very good job in the Hadassah hospital. I remember that's probably something in the 1972 or 1973. And he used to get a very good salary in that time. You know, the whole family used to live in two rooms only. So while my father started working and getting a very good income, he started adding, you know, one room here, another floor. And then we became so big and our life completely changed. You couldn't believe that till 73, I don't remember that I know what does it mean a fridge? What does it mean a TV? What does it mean a radio? I don't know. Only after the Israelis came in, we start discovering, let's say, the technology in that time. So we don't have power in home, man. We don't have power in home. So after the Israelis came and my father worked in Hadassah, we start developing, I can say, every month. And you know, I have a very quiet father who is totally not involved in any politics. You know, he died while he was 82 years old. He never ever been summoned by the police. He never ever been stopped by the police. He drove his car for 25 years without one report. He never get from the police. So I think that we really start enjoying, let's say, life since the Israelis almost arrived to the West Bank and East Jerusalem. And on the other side, Chris, very important point to raise here. I want to tell you that the Gaza Strip used to belong to Egypt for 19 years, from 1948 till 67. West Bank and East Jerusalem used to be under the Jordanians in that time. Neither the Egyptian nor the Jordanians in that time tried to found a Palestinian state. Neither the Jordanians nor the Egyptian tried to link between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Now, the Jordanians and the Egyptians demanding Israel for a Palestinian state. But you was ruling us for 19 years and you never thought to give the Palestinians a state in that time. So unfortunately, this is exactly what the Arab leaders almost did to the Palestinians.
I have a question for you, Bassem, in relation
Please.
to your view of the United States in terms of the negotiations that have gone on through the years. You talk about, you've already mentioned Clinton and Biden. There's Obama and Bush before that. How do you feel the U.S. In relations with the Palestinians and with Israel? And what are your opinions about those?
You know, I have really a problem with the United States administrations. When we start looking for the past probably 20 years, you know, the United States administrations, either they are pro-Israeli or they are pro-Palestinians. And by being a pro-Israeli or being a pro-Palestinian, you will never be able to bring peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. If I want to compare as an example, between Barack Obama and Ronald Trump, there is a huge difference. In my opinion, Barack Obama for 8 years did nothing to the world. And you can see the most interesting thing that Barack Obama did when he withdrew from Iraq, and he offered the Iraq and the Iraqi on a tray, a golden tray, to the terror. Look, Nobody is able to fight the terror in Iraq because of Barack Obama. This is how we are going to continue. Barack Obama, that he is the one who destroyed Iraq, not the Iraqis, Barack Obama. Now, let's go to Donald Trump. You know, sometimes when I am mentioning his name and I am telling people how wonderful this guy is, people getting upset on me. But you know, I remember Donald Trump in one of the ABAC meetings in Washington, D.C., before he was elected. He appeared there and he said something very interesting that I will never, ever forget it. What he said? He said, towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, I am the one who is going to solve it. And everybody start laughing. Then he continued by saying, I am going to solve it as a businessman, not as a politician, which I completely agree with him. I think that we, the Palestinians, made a huge mistake that we didn't get the deal of the century that he talked about it. I think that the deal of century was full of economic prosperity. Billions of dollars are waiting for that deal. I think that this is the important issue right now. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict will never, ever be solved without economic prosperity. Economic prosperity is first, then the solution will be the second. But these days, since the Oslo Agreement until today, everybody is pushing towards the solution, but no one is pushing towards the economic prosperity. And this is why we failed to reach any kind of peace with Israel. I think the international community should have to change its foreign policy towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and to start working on the economic prosperity rather than solutions. If you will solve the economic prosperity immediately, that will take you towards future peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Which demands then, you've written on BDS, Boycott, Divestments,
Exactly,
and Sanctions.
Exactly.
Tell us about some of your writing and your evaluation. BDS always gets news.
I think, you know, I used to call these peoples as gangsters and thugs. I think that the BDS people used to be jobless and they found a job forever because this conflict is not going to be solved. So those people already found a job forever. I think that the BDS is only using the Palestinians. They never fallen in love with us. They never support us. They never try to provide any economic solution to the Palestinians. It's the opposite. I think that they are trying to make our life harder and harder. You know, while these Palestinian workers who are working in X factory, and that factory will be closed because the activities of the BDS, these Palestinian workers has been kicked out from their jobs, and the BDS never ever try to help them to find a job for them or to finance their life. This is one of the major problems. So the BDS is another organization who are using the Palestinians. They are not helping the Palestinians at all. They are using us, like the Arab leaders used us, like the United Nations used us, like the UNRWA used us, like the Amnesty International using us, like the Human Rights Watch using us. So we are only used by those organizations, but those organizations never ever try to provide any help to the Palestinians.
What are they using you, the Palestinian people, for? For their own benefit?
I think that each organization has his own political agenda, and they are just using us in terms to achieve their own goals and their own aims. But the issue is not the Palestinians. The issue is the foreign agenda that those organizations are working on. And this is one of the major problems of the Palestinians. That's exactly the problem right now. We just used by those organizations why they never ever provide any kind of help.
Bassem, you actually wrote in an article that you did for Times of Israel, you sum it up saying, because recently Ben & Jerry's was influenced by Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions, the ice cream company. And it was a big deal. And you wrote, Ben & Jerry's decision to withdraw from the West Bank is nothing but performative activism, failing to help Palestinians in any meaningful way. In fact, it is actively harming us in the process. So what someone feels some self-righteousness by thinking we're helping the Palestinians are actually taking money out of their pockets to supply for their families.
That's exactly what's really happening, Chris. That's exactly what is happening. I think that we are losing from those people rather than we are benefiting from them. I am very happy, first of all, that Ben & Jerry's already canceled, their decision, and they came back to the West Bank and they start selling their own products and their own ice cream. I tried to sue them in the United States. I found a lawyer who already opened a file to one of the New York courts over there, but looks like to me that the administration of the Ben & Jerry's discussed the issue, and they found that by boycotting Israel, that will never ever help the Palestinians. Mm-hmm. So probably this is the main reason, I believe, that those people getting back to their normal. I think that one of the major problem here in the United States, that the legislators of the United States should have to consider the BDS as anti-Semite organization. And the legislators in the United States should have to stop any kind of funding if it is coming from any charities or organization to the BDS, and to be clear to that legislators that the BDS movement is just causing harm to the Palestinians rather than it is helping them. I hope that the legislators in the United States will wake up one day and will look to the BDS movement as anti-Semite organization, and any activities of the BDS should have to be prohibited, mainly on the campuses of the universities in the United States.
Bassem, it's so refreshing to hear you speak. I wish I could vote for you for some position.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
But one of the articles you wrote, a blog way back in June of 2021, Israel is not an apartheid state. I thought that was, here's a Palestinian man saying Israel is not an apartheid state. And then you wrote, this government represents the strength of Israel's democracy. That's when Bennett's government was put into place. You say the government represents the strength of Israel's democracy, a rarity in the Middle East. It also reflects on the diversity of the people of Israel. Can you comment about that? We talk about that all the time at Friends of Israel. I'd like to hear you talk about it.
Yes, Steve, I am a person who was on 4 different visits to South Africa. 2 times I visited the Apartheid Museum. I saw the videos. I read the history. And what I saw there never ever exists under the Israelis. Now, for me, the word of apartheid is a racist word rather than it is a political word. The issue between the Palestinians and the Israelis is not racist. It's a political issue. It's not white and black. While you can see in any department in Israel, you can see Arabs working together with Jews over there. And that's never ever happened in the apartheid regime in the South Africa. So those who want to criticize Israel are trying to use such kind of slogan which called apartheid. For me, the word apartheid is a slogan. It's not a fact on the ground. I am the one who is living there. I am the one who is developing there. And I know what is going on in Israel. Israel never ever been an apartheid regime or an apartheid state. I think that the world should have to start realizing that the life of the Palestinians under the Israelis is much better than under any other Arab country in the world.
That's quite a statement to make. Wow.
I visited Lebanon. I visited Syria. I visited Jordan. I visited Egypt. I visited Tunisia. I visited Morocco. I didn't ever saw the Palestinians in those countries such happy like the Palestinians who are living in Israel. I went to the refugee camps in Syria and in Lebanon. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. A refugee living in a camp in Lebanon is not allowed to leave the camp without a permission. That's never happened in Israel, excuse me. I was living in a refugee camp, and then I moved out of the refugee camp without asking the Israeli authorities for any permissions. Without. I just changed place. I went on the next day to the Ministry of Interior. I said, I changed an address. Here is my address. And immediately they changed it in my ID. That's never happened in Lebanon. That's never happened in Syria. So I think the Amnesty International, if they want to learn what is an apartheid, they should have to visit Lebanon and Syria. And then they will start realizing that Israel is a paradise rather than it is an apartheid.
I'm interested, Bassem, that from your take on this, because you're talking about politics, Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and how it's a political issue. It's not a racial issue. I'm interested your thought on normally whenever we get a take on what's going on in Israeli politics, we hear it either from media or we hear it from some Israeli official, but I've never really asked the question from a Palestinian who lives in Jericho. I mean, I'm sure you keep up with Israeli politics. There's a lot happening in Israel right now. What's your take on what's going on in the Knesset? And then how is that going to affect what's going on with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Yeah, it's very interesting question, Chris. But let me just add another comment towards the apartheid. I think that when Naftali Bennett elected as a prime minister in Israel, I think that he is the one who proves to the world that Israel is not apartheid by joining an Islamist political party in his government. Islamists used to be arrested in the Arab world, except in Israel. Except in Israel, they are a part of the government, a part of the government. It's reminding me that there was a joke that the President Sisi of Egypt called Naftali Bennett, and he told Naftali Bennett how it could be that we are arresting the Islamic Brotherhood movements while they are joining your government. So I think that that's also another proof that Israel is not an apartheid. Now towards the Israeli politics. I think that the Israeli politics can prove one important thing: how much Israel is a democratic country. You see, in 3.5 years, Israel is going to run the fifth elections. The fifth elections. While in the Arab countries, leaders used to rule their people for 30 or 40 years without any elections. I think that that's very interesting. I think that the Israelis are very aware about their own politics. And I believe that Israel knows exactly how to manage itself and how to manage its politics in the meantime. I think that the Israelis are probably getting so tired from such a thing of repeating elections, you know, every 6 months. But I believe that probably in the coming elections, the Israeli politics will be settled. And I used to say, you know, sometimes that one of the problems of the Israelis and the Palestinians is the lack of leadership. A lack of leadership. Unfortunately, the Israelis don't have a strong leadership right now. Palestinians don't have a strong leadership right now. And this is how things, unfortunately, are not going in the direct, in the correct direction. I think that it's very difficult in the meantime to look after leaders right now in Israel. It's very difficult. I think if you will come to any Israeli today and ask him, who is the only real leader in Israel, everybody will tell you Bibi Netanyahu. He is the last leader right now in, let's say, in the current generation. And unfortunately, Israel lost a huge leaders during the time. We don't want to talk, you know, about Golda Meir. We don't want to talk about Yitzhak Rabin. We don't want to talk about Ariel Sharon. We don't want to talk about Yitzhak Shamir. We don't want to talk about Menachem Begin. We don't want to talk about those people. Unfortunately, those people will never, ever be replaced, unfortunately. You will never see another Ariel Sharon. You will never see another Yitzhak Rabin. You will never see another Menachem Begin. Those are the real leaders of the state of Israel. Unfortunately, Israel and the Israelis almost lost them. And let me hope that probably in the coming 2 generations or 3 generations, a new charismatic leaders will appear among the Palestinians and among the Israelis, and then probably peace will be possible between both of them.
Bassem, I'm sure the question on our listeners' minds right now as they're listening to you is, what is your reception like in Jericho? What is your reception like in the Palestinian Authority, or even just among your neighbors? What they must know you. You're an outspoken person. You're all over the internet. You've reached, you were having a meeting with Dennis Prager on. I mean, that you are definitely a mouthpiece for your viewpoints. Yeah. But are they a minority viewpoint, or do you think there's something brewing under the water that's, you know, bubbling up and more people think like you? I'm interested that what do people think about it?
I think, Chris, from what I am hearing, what I am watching, what I am feeling, the majority of the Palestinians these days almost lost the trust in their own leadership. And I'm not talking only about the West Bank, I'm talking also about Gaza. I have a lot of friends in Gaza. Sometimes I used to talk to them, and those people used to tell me that if Israel will open one of its passages for 2 hours, 30% of the youths in Gaza will immigrate to another country. So people just waiting for opportunity.
Yeah.
People want to flee from Gaza. People want to escape from Gaza. People knows that under the Hamas, there is no future, no future. And towards the people in the West Bank, I think that the people in the West Bank are trying more and more to focus on their own economic prosperity. That's the most important issue. If you will come today to any ordinary Palestinian in the West Bank and asking him, what are the most 3 priorities that you are seeking? He will say a job to survive, to secure the education system and the health system for my children. Nobody is talking about the wall. Nobody is talking about the settlements. Nobody even talking about the foundation of the Palestinian state, which means, in my opinion, the majority of the Palestinians are people who are seeking dignity rather than identity. We want dignity, and dignity can be approached and achieved only via economic prosperity. Chris, you couldn't believe a Palestinian worker under the Palestinian Authority monthly salary is $400, while in Israel it is $3,000. This is the dignity.
Yeah.
This is the dignity. You couldn't believe workers under the Hamas working 12 hours for $3 a day. $3, 10 Israeli shekel for 12 hours working in the Gaza Strip. Where is the dignity? Where is the dignity here? I think that people start realizing more and more that their future under the Israelis will be much better than it is under the Palestinian Authority. You know, when Israel start talking sometimes, when the right wing in Israel start talking about sometimes how to annex Area C to Israel. Area C in the West Bank, they want to annex it to the state of Israel. When I visited people, Palestinians who are living in Area C, you couldn't believe what people asking me. When Israel is going to annex us? When? Yeah, this is, I think that that's showing me only one thing, the oppression that these Palestinians are living under the Palestinian Authority. It's an oppression to live under the Palestinian Authority. Look today to the workers. You couldn't believe that 15,000 Palestinian workers every day escape to inside Israel through the wall and through the fence to go to work. He knows he might be shot, he might be injured, he might be killed, he might be arrested, but he is seeking dignity. While he is working in Israel, he can earn at least 500 shekels in a day, but to work under the Palestinian Authority is going to be 50 shekel a day. So I think that people knows exactly what they are doing, And I think that that's showing us how much the Palestinians are really people who are seeking an economic prosperity rather than anything else.
Bassem, when we started, we told you the audience is basically, our audiences are Christian. And
Yes.
I know that you've written about Christians living under the Palestinian Authority. And you mentioned specifically Bethlehem and the difference. Can you comment about a Christian life in the Palestinian Authority?
See, Steve, I just, a month ago, I heard some statistics which is really shocked me. The statistics are that during the 80s, the percentage of the Christians among the Palestinians was 20%. 20%. Can you believe how much today? Today it is 1%. Can you believe that? 1%. I think that the elections of 2006, when the Hamas won the elections in that time, that's already put the Christians under a huge fear. We know what the Hamas did to the Christians in Gaza. We know how many Christians has been killed in Gaza by the Hamas because they are Christians. Because they are Christians. So when the percentage is dropping from 20% to 1%, then you can understand everything over here. I think that the Christians are very scared these days, and the Christians are trying, to keep themselves out of the frame of politics. The Christians are not participating in any political activities at all, not. These people are minority, and there is no one who is going to defend them if these people will be harassed or anything wrong will happen to them. So I think that this is really something very important that the world should have to start dealing with. How the number of the Christians dropped from 20% to 1%. I think that's really need a huge research by the international community in terms to find out where is the problem and where all those 19% of the Christians disappeared.
Bassem, we only have a few moments remaining, but I want you to speak to our Christian audience who love Israel. But what would you say to them when it comes to the Palestinian people? What can they do as evangelical Christians when it comes to the Palestinian people, especially with the viewpoints and the clarity that you have? I'm interested what word you would give to them in these final moments.
See, in my opinion, those evangelicals should have to visit as much as they can in Palestinian areas, to meet with Palestinians, to ask the Palestinians what are their real problems. How is life under Israel and how is life under the Palestinian? I think that the evangelicals can learn a lot about what is really going on over there. I am a person, who used to take a lot of visitors, by the way, to the West Bank, to Nablus, to Ramallah, to Bethlehem, to Hebron, and to make a direct connection with those visitors with the Palestinians, that they can learn from them more and more about their own life. So I think that this is one of the major important things that they should have to do, because I am a person who believes that those evangelicals probably one day will be used as a bridge towards peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians. You know, we need a bridge right now. There is unfortunately a very deep gap right now between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Leaders couldn't reach each other. We need a bridges. We need someone to build a bridges to let us reach each other. I think that this is one of the main, let's say, messages from me to the evangelicals who are visiting Israel from time to time. I know that they are a huge community, and I want also to use this opportunity and to tell them that during September, I will be in the United States. So anyone who would like to bring me to his church, to his community from the evangelicals, I will be very happy to come over there and to talk even more and more about the current situation between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Bassem, let me just real quick. How long are you going to be in the States?
I am planning right now, you know, I didn't book my ticket yet, but I am planning to be from the 8th of September till the 20th of September. But anyone who might want to invite me after the 20th, still I can't do it because I didn't book yet my ticket.
Bassem, I'll say I'm glad that you said that about being the bridge, because we recently had a delegation of pastors and Friends of Israel workers that went with the Zionist Organization of America to Israel. And our leader that was on our team, his name's Tim Munger, he decided to connect two churches, one in East Jerusalem, one in Michigan, and they both had the same name, Calvary Baptist Church. Calvary Baptist, and he introduced the two pastors to one another, and it was a great opportunity for the Palestinians to share with our pastors about what's going on. So I agree with you about being the bridge there. We, you know, at Friends of Israel, we value that as well.
That's really very important, and that's exactly what the Israelis and the Palestinians need: the bridge to bring us together, to approach each other in terms, you know, probably to solve this unsolvable conflict, let me call it. Yeah.
Well, Bassem, can you share with our watchers, our listeners, all of it, how they can get a hold of you? Do you want to share? You have a website, I believe, right?
Yeah, I have a website. Do you have it? It's BassemEid.com.
Very easy.
That's easy.
yeah, it's very easy. Yeah, and they can, of course, reach me via email, info@BassemEid.com.
I love it.
And I will be very happy, you know, if these people will contact me, and I believe I can provide more and more first-hand information about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
That's great. Bassem, we want to thank you very much from Friends of Israel Equip, FOI.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Chris.
All right, great to see you, my friend. God bless.
Take care.
Thank you. All the best, Steve. Thank you so much. Thank you. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.